Welcome back, horror fans, cinephiles, and giallo enthusiasts. This is Tanner Leeser, your host for all things giallo, here on The King in Giallo. Our next stop on our journey through giallo cinema is the fifth full-length giallo film from Mario Bava, A Bay of Blood, released in 1971. This video is an edited-down version. Herein, you will find the overview portion of the full-length video. Coming next week will be the complete deep dive with the review and GialliTally. This video may be watched without any spoilers. Here is A Bay of Blood overview. A Bay of Blood, also called Twitch of the Death Nerve, Carnage, Bloodbath, and The Last House on the Left Part 2 is an Italian production. The film is directed by Mario Bava, who also co-wrote the film along with Giuseppe Zaccariello and Filippo Ottoni, from a story by Dardano Sacchetti and Franco Barberi. Music is composed by Stelvio Cipriani. The cast is comprised of Claudine Auger as Renata, Luigi Pistilli as Alberto, Leopoldo Trieste as Paolo Foscari, Claudio Volonté as Simon, Laura Betti as Anna Foscari, Chris Avram as Ventura, Anna M. Rosati as Laura, Brigitte Skay as Brunhilde, and Isa Miranda as Countess Federica Donati. The plot follows a revolving door of different players who, one after the other, attempt to kill off all heirs in their way to lay claim to the inheritance of a sought-after Bayside property. The action is set in motion after the brutal slaying of the countess who owns the property, and one by one, all prospective suitors, which include family and friends, are simultaneously the killers and the victims, as no one can be trusted in this greedy fight for control of the estate. The dead pool is further increased by the surprise arrival of a group of horny teenagers who decide to vacation in a dilapidated building on the lake. Who will make it out on top in the end in Mario Bava's most blood-soaked film and the blueprint for the American slasher? After Mario Bava's 1970 spaghetti western, Roy Colt and Winchester Jack, was not received well, the maestro of Italian horror decided to return to what he did best, which is horror. This giallo would embrace more of the comedic elements seen sparingly in Five Dolls for an August Moon, 1970, and amp up the gore special effects to a degree not seen in any of his previous films, including Blood and Blacklace. Troy Howarth points out the brilliance of the opening shots, which follow a fly's perspective until it drops into the water, which he says works to accentuate the two major themes of the film. Firstly, the fact that death is inevitable and can come suddenly in this story, and that humanity, despite all of its complexities, is little more than an insect, and that our actions are ultimately minuscule in the grand scheme of things. This sentiment is set up in Bava's previous giallo, Hatchet for the Honeymoon, 1970, in the main character's opening inner monologue when he catches a fly and feeds it to a spider. The film highlights Bava's fascination and curiosity with exploring the darkness and depravity within man, but it never feels too judgmental, and we are consistently entertained with the characters who walk the line of being amusing and repulsive. A Bay of Blood feels like a rehashing of the plot skeleton from Bava's 1970 giallo, Five Dolls for an August Moon, but he manages to sidestep the problems that film faced, and on top of that, Bava ramps up the degree of gore and violence in an effort to compete with the sensationally violent kills found in Dario Argento's giallo films. Carlo Romboldi helps to bring these gruesome murder set pieces to fruition, and the result is truly one of the most gory giallo films. And in hindsight, to me, it is comical how the killings of the teens 30 minutes in feels like the movie suddenly changing and becoming a proto-slasher. Then after they're all dead, it returns to being a giallo. But this is not a criticism I'm throwing, because I believe it makes the film so unique and, dare say, hysterical. Speaking of the characters, plenty of new as well as familiar faces make up the cast. Actor, writer, director Leopoldo Trieste makes his first giallo film appearance and would also show up later in the 1973 British giallo Don't Look Now by Nicholas Roeg. And you are welcome to say it is not a giallo, and we are allowed to disagree. Trieste appeared in I Vitelloni, 1953 by Federico Fellini, and The Godfather Part 2, 1974 by Francis Ford Coppola. One of the two films he directed, Città di Notte, 1956, was photographed by Mario Bava. Actor Luigi Pistilli, a giallo veteran at this point, returns again to the genre, last seen starring in the mixed-bag giallo film The Iguana with the Tongue of Fire, which came out this same year, 1971. Claudine Auger plays the wife from hell archetype of Pistilli's character. She was last seen in a giallo also this same year, The Black Belly of the Tarantula. Laura Betti makes her second and final giallo film appearance, last seen in Mario Bava's previous giallo, Hatchet for the Honeymoon, 1970. Laura Betti relays a truly entertaining story from the set of A Bay of Blood, citing the lower budget of the project as leading into the anecdote. She says during the filming of one particular scene, which was taking all day, Bava was forced to give up because Laura Betti and co-star Luigi Pistilli could not stop laughing during the filming. As she goes on to explain, they were directed to run through the forest starting at opposite points and meet up in front of the camera and speak a couple lines of crucial dialogue whilst being out of breath. Sounds easy enough. Lights, camera, action. The two actors run and hit their marks, but every time they are about to speak, they would find Bava standing right behind the camera waving a single branch in front of it, acting for the entire woods. The two would laugh uncontrollably every time they saw Bava waving the branch so intently right in front of them. They'd reset and try again, but always the same result. Bava would get angry and attempt to yell at the two, but even the director couldn't help but burst into laughter at the entire situation. And so they eventually scrapped the scene. Although a version of the scene can be found in the movie still. Isa Miranda is back with Bava after appearing in his aforementioned spaghetti western flop. Her career highlights would include La Signora di Tutti, 1934, and La Ronde, 1950, both by Max Ophuls. The Walls of Malapaga, 1949 by René Clément, Colpo Rovente, and Dorian Gray, 1970 by Massimo Dallamano. Claudio Volonté, oftentimes billed as Claudio Camasso, is the younger brother of actor Gian Maria Volonté, legendary Italian actor of films such as Fistful of Dollars, For a Few Dollars More, Investigation of a Citizen Above Suspicion, and my favorite Zapata spaghetti western, A Bullet for the General. Claudio's career, however, is unfortunately far outshined by his older brothers, but he does have a few noteworthy roles, such as in The Unnaturals, 1969 by Antonio Margheriti. Claudio's career would be ended by his imprisonment following an accidental killing, eventually leading to the actor ending his life in prison in late 1977. A Bay of Blood shares some strong ties to Bava's masterwork, Blood and Blacklace, 1964. Both films either end or begin with the death or murder of a countess caused by their love and trust towards a morally corrupt man. Both films have a diary containing secrets as a plot point. Further setting this giallo apart from numerous others in this era is the presence of believable, strong female characters. The genre for a while would have a bad reputation for relegating women to either being helpless victims, objects of lust, or the climactic antagonizing force, but Bava is able to visualize for himself the difference between women being victims or victimizers, and beyond this, he sees a capability of them being more cunning and vigorous than their male counterparts, and finally, that these women might allow these same male characters to assume that they are in control, only for them to cause their own undoing. Bava certainly would be unique in this regard compared to other horror writers and directors, and this would also make its way into American slashers in the next decade. The structure of the story, hopping from one greedy killer who is then killed by the next, and so on, is one of a kind in giallo, and like I mentioned earlier, is better realized in this attempt versus in Bava's previous Five Dolls for an August Moon. Also, the story involving Alberto and Renata has been compared to a modern-day Macbeth, with the husband, Alberto, fulfilling many of the same beats as Macbeth's titular character. A Bay of Blood remains a standout for Bava in terms of him making a return to form with his well-received horror films of the 1960s. The great soundtrack by Stelvio Cipriani would mark the first of many more collaborations to come between the director and composer. The film does receive some criticism for not being as elegant with how it handles the typical Bava stylistic trappings, with some saying that the zooms seem to be thrown in willy-nilly, and that the camera work is clunky, but the film is still a staple in the evolution of the genre and a benchmark contribution to 1980s slasher films, which would dominate the horror genre in the next decade. Here is some IMDb trivia for the film. Friday the 13th, 1980, and Friday the 13th Part 2, 1981, pay homage to this movie by lifting 2 murders from it, one in each movie, almost shot for shot. Also, the locations in all 3 movies look similar. Often considered Mario Bava's most influential film and the film that started the slasher craze, which is still popular today, many fans of the genre consider this the grandfather of the modern slasher film. Dario Argento loved the film so much, he had a friend, who was a projectionist, steal him a print of the film during its first run in Italy. The theater ended up showing Hatchet for the Honeymoon to replace the stolen print for the remainder of the film's run there, about a week and a half according to Argento. He possesses the print to this day. The film's low budget resulted in Mario Bava being his own cinematographer. He had to utilize a simple child's wagon for the film's many tracking shots. Due to the film's low budget, most of the locations in the film belong to director Mario Bava or members of the crew. The interiors of Countess Federica's home were shot at a favorite villa of Bava's, and the interiors of Frank Ventura's country house were shot at a summer home owned by the producer. One promotional gimmick was that every ticket holder was required to pass through the final warning station, where a theater worker warned you face to face that this may be the last shock film you will ever want to see. A Bay of Blood was one of 39 films that were successfully prosecuted under the Obscene Publications Act in the UK, a list commonly known as the Video Nasties. This is Mario Bava's personal favorite of all the films he made. The film reportedly has more alternative titles than any other movie. To ensure the utmost realism in depicting the 13 different murders, Mario Bava insisted that Carlo Romboldi be hired to provide the special makeup effects. When Christopher Lee first saw the movie, he was reportedly so disgusted at the level of violence, he left the theater in protest. Pussy. Mario Bava deeply regretted filming the scene where a bug is pinned alive. One of the re-release titles for this film was The Last House on the Left Part 2, even though this film has nothing to do with Wes Craven's The Last House on the Left, 1972. In fact, it was made a year earlier than Last House. Mario Bava personally suggested the title Twitch of the Death Nerve for the American release after hearing it was being marketed as a sequel. The film was released under both titles. The origin of the film was Mario Bava's desire to work with Laura Betti again. Betti had previously appeared in Bava's Hatchet for the Honeymoon, and the two had gotten along so well that they concocted the premise of this film for another project together. In 2005, the magazine Total Film named this one of the 50 greatest horror films of all time. The film not only had numerous release titles, but also several working titles throughout the production. Among them include The Stench of Flesh, Thus Do We Live to Be Evil, and That Will Teach Them to Be Bad. Ecologia del Delitto, Ecology of Crime, ended up being the first title the film was screened under in Italy. This was actually shot on a piece of private property with few trees, but because of Mario Bava's camera work, it appears to have been shot in a large wooded area. I guess waving the branch in front of the camera's eye was a good idea. The 1971 Avoriaz Film Festival jurors awarded the film the Best Makeup and Special Effects Award. Carlo Romboldi's effects work also earned the film a Special Mention Award at the prestigious Sitges Festival in 1971. Roberto Rossellini, who Mario Bava had worked for on his own films, shot a day's worth of second unit footage. While it's uncredited, most of the footage appeared in the final cut. The Countess's suicide note reads, "February 13th. It is over. I am tired. My life no longer has meaning." In the United States, the film was marketed as the second film rated V for violence during its first release. This movie had its premiere at the 1971 Avoriaz Film Festival. The movie played scattered dates as Snuff Is My Game in 1976 in order to capitalize on the controversy surrounding the movie Snuff, 1975. Some mistakenly thought that the film was actually Snuff being shown under a different title. This included one Boston newspaper critic who wrote a scathing review without actually viewing the film, believing it to be Snuff trying to pass itself off as its own sequel. The first line of dialogue isn't spoken until 8 minutes and 50 seconds have passed. A Bay of Blood is still banned in South Africa. The movie was initially released uncut and unrated in Germany, then later got completely banned throughout the country due to the film's extreme violence. Only in January of 2023 was the banishment lifted, and the next month later, the FSK granted this movie a not under 18 rating. Italian censorship visa number 58666, delivered to the film on August 12, 1971. Thank you for watching this overview-only video. Don't miss the full overview, review, and GialliTally for A Bay of Blood next week. As of right now, you can find the movie streaming on Tubi, Amazon Prime Video, Plex, AMC+, Sling TV, and on Shudder. Don't forget to like this video and join me next week to see the rest of this review. Comment your predictions for the AZ score for the movie and the final GialliTally score. Thank you very much for your continued support. This is Tanner Leeser for The King in Giallo, and if nothing else, I'll see you next time.